Hey guys, I know it's the first time in like 17 years that I've made a video, but I'm here today with a video about one of my favourite games, League of Legends. Basically, we have a load of new guys on our teamspeak who are just getting into the game, and I really don't have the willpower or time to say everything 50 times to teach them all the basics of the game. So I figured if I make this video, I can get all the information out that I need. You guys can watch it, you can rewatch it if you need to. I don't have to say everything a million times. And even if you're not part of our community, you can probably still benefit and possibly learn something from watching this video. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I would advise you to do is the tutorials. Whether you've played Dota, Smite, Heroes of the Storm or whatever, do the tutorials. It teaches you the basic things like how to get gold, how to move around, that sort of thing. If you do the battle training, it also gives you a nice amount of experience which will help you level faster. But just to help out, I will reiterate some of the main pointers here. To move and do auto attacks, you right click on the ground or on the target. Auto attacking is also referred to as basic attacking and is what your champion does by default when you right click on a target. Abilities are the icons in the centre of your screen and by default are bound to your Q, W, E and R keys. Every champion's abilities are individual to them and are massively varied. Some are cross-map rockets, some will let you dash between targets, some heal, some do a little shit ton of damage, and some turn you invisible. You gain gold to spend in the in-game shop in a variety of ways. You gain gold passively, that is by not doing anything, but this is not a substantial amount. The best way to get gold is by last hitting minions. The minions are the little guys who flood the lanes in waves. It is crucial to note that only last hitting the minions will give you gold, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail later. The game itself is all about destroying the enemy's nexus, or their core, or whatever you want to call it. To do that, you must destroy all of the towers in at least one lane. Destroy that lane's inhibitor, which will then begin the spawning of super minions in that lane. Destroy the two nexus towers, and finally the nexus itself. You can do all of this in either one lane or all three, it really doesn't matter, but if all three inhibitors are alive, and they do respawn after a few minutes, then you will not be able to attack the nexus. Now, whereas in-game you have gold when you're playing as a champion, out of the game itself you're referred to as a summoner because of the game's lore. There are two main types of summoner currency, influence points or IP and riot points RP. Influence points are gained by playing games, whereas riot points are paid for with real money, and both can be used in the summoner shop. The summoner shop is where you will spend a fair amount of time. This is where you buy champions. Buying champions means you will keep them forever, whereas the game itself features a weekly rotation of free champions to let you try them before you buy them. There is a different champion pool which does not change for the low levels, and the regular champion pool itself will change, I think it's every Tuesday. So every Tuesday you'll have a new group of champions to try out. Here you can also buy skins for your champions, which doesn't affect gameplay but does look kinda cool and is really just for swag points. You can also buy things like summoner icons, ward skins, IP or XP boosts or runes. Now runes are super important once you get to a higher level, to the point where, you know, your early game could depend on you having the right set of runes, and I will tell you more about them in a second. Champions, or heroes, are the playable characters that you will be using in the game. There are something stupid like 150 champions, with new ones released every month or two. All of them have different abilities, different stories, different playstyles and different roles. The main roles are assassins, fighters, tanks, mages, marksmen and supports. Now these terms weren't explained to me before, and I was a MOBA noob, so I had no idea what any of them meant, so I will explain them to you now. An assassin is usually squishy, meaning that they don't have many defensive stats like health or armour, so they're usually pretty easy to take down if you catch them. Their main objective is to dive into a fight, take out any squishy enemies and get out before they take too much damage. You can have assassins that deal physical and magic damage, which again I will explain a bit more later. And some good examples of assassins are Master Yi, Katarina, LeBlanc and Zed. Next up are fighters. Fighters are supposed to do a sustained amount of damage in fights. They are usually strong enough defensively to not just melt when a fight starts, but not enough to survive for an extended period of time. Examples would be Vi, Fiora and Aurelia. A tank is a fighter who trades that bit of damage for more defense. Most fighters can be built tanky. This means that they will have a literal shit ton of armor or magic resist, and they will just dive into the middle of fights and soak up as much damage as physically possible. They're usually good at providing what is known as peel, which is steering damage away from the squishy members of their team and onto themselves, and the best examples are probably Alistair, Singed and Malphite. These guys do magic damage to their opponents and usually have AoE spells. An AoE spell is an area of effect spell and is an ability that does damage to an area rather than to an individual. They're usually pretty squishy, so killing them is fairly easy, but if they start getting ahead, they will just poo on your dreams. Examples are Ziggs, Oriana and Lux. Next up is my favourite role, the Marksman. And Marksmen are squishy as balls, to be honest, and they rely on their team, as much as I hate to admit it, to keep the damage away from them. They rely pretty much solely on their auto attacks, which do generally physical damage, usually from range, and always from range, and most of their abilities will do physical damage as well, with a couple of exceptions. Their job is to do as much damage to the enemy team in team fights as physically possible, and they will usually stick around the outside of a fight, putting damage in. My favourite examples are Jinx, Graves, and for complete beginners, Ashe. Ashe is just really good for new people. She's so simple, easy to learn, and she's quite fun as well. Finally, we have the often overlooked supports. They are based mostly around utility, meaning that they have abilities that can be used in a variety of fashions. They will babysit their marksman early in the game, and in the late game they are usually responsible for vision on the map and sometimes making plays. They can be tanky or squishy and can be used in loads of different ways really. Some strong picks for support are Thresh, Blitzcrank and Morgana. Runes and Masteries are often overlooked, but can give you a massive advantage in your games. Runes aren't really worth buying until level 20, as they come in 3 different tiers and won't really help you until the 3rd tier. Masteries are a different kettle of fish though. You unlock 1 rune slot and 1 mastery point every level until you reach level 30, which is the highest possible level before you start playing ranked. I will explain the ranking system a bit later. There are 4 different types of rune: marks, seals, glyphs and quintessences, often referred to as reds, yellows, blues and quints. They can increase your stats in just about every field, ranging from cooldown reduction, i.e. how long it takes before you can use your abilities again, to the amount of damage you deal or the amount of gold you gain every 10 seconds. There are 9 slots for marks, seals and glyphs and 3 for quintessences. At the beginning of each game you choose a rune page from the little drop down menu. You will need to buy more rune pages with either IP or RP. I think you get 2 by default, but they are definitely worth buying, especially once you start playing ranked a lot. Masteries are different though. You can have loads of mastery pages, I think 20, and they're all free. At level 30 you will have 30 mastery points to place in a page in the 3 sections: offense, defense and utility. You unlock the masteries in rows, as you can see, and to get to the final mastery in a tree you need to spend 21 points in that tree. This means that most people will have 21 points in one tree and then 9 in another, depending on what champion and role they're playing. For offense and defense, the masteries are similar to runes, but in the utility tree it's something quite different. For example, you can turn your health potions into total biscuits of rejuvenation, which is basically health potions on steroids, and you can increase the amount of gold you receive for kills and that sort of thing.
Now let's move on to summoner spells. At the beginning of every game in Champ Select, you'll be given the ability to choose 2 summoner spells. These are always the same for every champion and are by default bound to your DNF keys. Now there are a couple of different ones in featured game modes or on different maps, but I'll give you a quick rundown of the main ones that you'll use. Unless you really know what you're doing, Clarity, Cleanse and Clairvoyance won't be much use to you. You want to stay clear of them. Am I punny yet? Again, unless you really know what you're doing, you'll probably want to take Flash instead of Ghost, as it gives you a jump away and out of danger or into a fight, and you can use it to get over walls and that sort of thing. You should put it on F, as cool kids use F for Flash and D for damage or defense. Heal is a spell mostly taken by your AD carry or marksman. It restores health to yourself and a nearby allied champion while giving you a short movement speed buff. I should point out that a buff increases a stat while a debuff decreases it, just in case you weren't familiar with the concept. It used to be the meta for marksman to take barrier, but when heal began to help an allied champion, it was switched. Barrier is still occasionally used by mid laners, as it puts a shield on your champion that disappears after 2 seconds, but it can often be enough to save you from an ignite, which is the next summoner spell that we'll look at. Ignite sets an enemy champion ablaze and saps their health. It also reduces healing effects, which means that things like heal are nowhere near as useful if a target is ignited, hence going for barrier, since that's not a heal, it's a shield. Ignite is usually used at the beginning of a fight to stop someone from healing in the middle of it, or at the end of one to finish off a target when you get out. Just 3 more spells. Teleport is fairly self-explanatory. You can use it to teleport to a friendly tower, minion, or ward. It's very helpful for jumping into the middle of a team fight unexpectedly and turning it in your favour. It's usually taken by top laners. Smite is almost exclusively used for junglers, and I'll cover it in more detail later. Exhaust is usually taken by supports unless you're running some kind of weird team comp. It's used on enemy champions and lowers pretty much all of their stats like armor, magic resistance, attack speed, movement speed, and damage. If you use this on a strong enemy champion in the beginning of a fight, so one that's doing a lot of damage, you can give your team a chance to burst down that champion before they hurt you too much. So if your jungler comes in to gank you, you would usually want to exhaust the enemy AD carry, since they are the one that you are going to be trying to kill. So when you start up a match, assuming this is a standard 5v5 game, I really can't be asked to teach you about 3v3 Dominion or ARAM, because, I mean, who even plays them? You'll have one of 3 different champion select menus. The first is Team Builder. This allows you to build your team, basically. It allows you to play as the exact champion that you want in the exact role that you want. So if you've got 4 guys who want to play but you don't have a mid laner, then you start a Team Builder game and you'll be able to find that mid laner from people who are searching for teams that need one. On this screen you'll also be able to select your champion, you'll be able to select skins, summoner spells, your rune page and mastery page that you want to use for that game, as well as selecting your lane and your role. I'll explain where people go, like what role they choose when I'm talking about the meta in a couple of minutes. Wait for your spots to all be filled, have everybody ready up, and it'll find a game for you. The next game mode is blind pick. This means that everybody gets into the lobby and shouts out what role they want in the chat box, and then hopes to God that nobody is an asshole. You can pick whatever champion you want as long as someone on your team hasn't already taken it. The common agreement is that in blind pick, call order is the most important. Whoever said their role first gets that pick. This is pretty much the sole reason that they made Team Builder, too many arguments. The final mode is Draft Pick. This is what is used in rank and requires you to have 16 champions. Draft Pick consists of 2 phases, the bans and the picks. When the teams have loaded in, the first player on each team will choose 3 champions that they want to ban. This champion then cannot be picked by either team. Usually these bans will be targeted at champions that are perceived to be overpowered or are strong, or that the first pick just doesn't want to play against. Don't be afraid to suggest bans in the chat, but don't be a dick about it. Blue team goes first and red team goes second. After each team has banned 3 champions, the picking starts. Going down in order, blue team picks 1, red team picks 2, blue team picks 2, etc, etc, until everyone has chosen a champion. You cannot have the same champion twice, so it's not like blind pick. In draft pick, it is a pick order that gets to determine who goes in what lane. The first pick gets to decide what they want first, and the last pick is usually consigned to support. If you want a specific role, feel free to say in chat that you prefer it, as it is much better to have players on lanes that they prefer if you can play another lane. Plus, then the rest of the team will love you if you give up your role for somebody. It is important to note that you can actually switch champions in draft pick as well. So if somebody picks a champion, if someone on your team picks a champion that you want to play, you can then switch with them later if you want to secure that champion and stop the enemy team from getting it. So one thing I see a lot of from people when I'm teaching them is that they all save their money until they can afford the big ticket items. Don't. Stop it. Let's take arguably one of the most important items for AD carries, the Infinity Edge. It costs 3,800 gold, and when you click on it you'll see the recipe on the right hand side. If you build any of these cheaper items that build into it, the price of the Infinity Edge drops accordingly. So if you buy the BF sword, which costs 1550 gold, then the price of the Infinity Edge drops down by 1550 gold. This means that you can build up to the bigger items while still actually increasing your stats. So a couple of side notes: if you don't know what to build, check a guide online. They're not perfect, and you shouldn't need them really once you get to know the game and understand champions a bit better. But it can help when you're learning a new champion. Otherwise, just buy the recommended items. Don't just buy any item though. Think about what you need. If you're being blown up by the enemy before you can do anything, in general this means you need some defense, and if you're not able to kill the enemy team's squishies and you're a damage dealer like an AD carry, you generally need a bit more damage. Do not, under any circumstances, use the locked camera. Learn to play without it. I cannot stress this enough. When one of the American guys switched his account at US, I won't name and shame him, but he was Bronze 5. I found out that he was still playing with his camera locked. I told him to stop, and after a couple of weeks he jumped up a few divisions purely because he could actually see more of what was happening. Press Y to unlock it. Learn to play without it, for the love of God. If you find it hard to keep track of where you are, then you can press spacebar to bring the camera back to you, but I can't stress this enough. Learn to play without the locked camera. It will make life a lot easier in the long run. Right, so the game is usually split up into about 3 time sections. The early game is where everyone sits in their lanes and farms. Junglers will try to gank the lanes, which is where they can come in to create either 2v1 or 3v2 situations to help their laners. The laners will try and take the enemy's towers. When a lane takes a tower, usually that signals the beginning of the mid game. This is where teams start grouping up, trying to push other lanes. If mid lane, for example, has won their lane, they'll start roaming around to try and help the other lanes win their lanes as well. Usually Dragon will be contested by 4 or 5 players on each team in this kind of time period. And then we have the late game. Late game, teams will almost always group as 4 or 5 and push objectives like Dragon, Baron and Towers. Almost every kill in this time period will be somebody being caught out or a team fight. This is where you do not want to be wandering around on your own, and most champions will be fully built by this time, so they'll have 4 or 5 items. Right, let's talk more about champion abilities. Every time you level up in the game, you get a point to throw into an ability. Every ability costs 1 point to level up, and leveling them up can do things like increase the damage of that ability, increase stun duration, reduce cooldown, that sort of thing. But I've heard things before like, I have 3 points saved up, but I still can't level up my R. Well, your Q, your W and your E will generally have 5 levels, and your R, or your ultimate ability, will have 3. Your ult can be leveled up at levels 6, 11 and 16. So if you aren't sure which... so you cannot do that on any of the other levels. I mean, if you've... say you hit level 6 and you forget that you get your ult, you level up something else instead, you can level up your ult on the next level, but you can't just do that every level. So just make sure you're remembering that. If you aren't sure which order to level up your abilities, then just check an online guide or read them and figure out what you think would be best for your team. So let's look at the meta. The meta or metagame is generally how people set up their teams to play the game. It's evolved from 5 AD carries to 5 mages to a load of AoE damage to just tanks, and it's had a load of other crazy combinations with people theory crafting teams that they think will work. But for solo queue, it's been important to have a standard combination of positions for people to play so that there's no confusion in champ select. And that meta is the one I'll be telling you right now, because that's the one that I think is the most important for you to learn. So obviously there are 3 lanes, and each of those lanes is also accompanied by the jungle. We'll look at bot lane first, which will usually consist of an AD carry, which is the marksman, also known as an ADC, along with a support. That support can be a tank, or it could be an AP champion, but what usually will make a good support is somebody who has a lot of crowd control, or CC, abilities that slow, a stun, or weaken the enemy somehow. They'll protect the ADC through the early stages of the game, and as a support, you will usually buy a gold item like an ancient coin, a relic shield, or a spell-thief's edge. You also buy potions and wards. They do not take minions, they do not kill the minions to get the gold, they get their gold from the gold item usually. This means that the ADC is the one that will be killing the minions for the gold. They'll usually buy a Doran's Blade to start the game, and the end game will have a load of damage items basically. Damage and attack speed is usually how it will go. So things like the Bloodthirster or the Infinity Edge, maybe a Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer. The reason that we have 2-man lane going bottom instead of top is for dragon control. It's much easier to win a fight and do dragon with 3 or 4 people than with 2 or 3, if you count the mid laner, especially when one of those guys is a high damage champion like the AD carry. Mid lane, these days it will usually be either an AP mage or an assassin. They're usually quite squishy, but will burst down enemies if they're given the chance. They don't need to be very mobile because their lane is quite short, but they are expected to roam top and bot when their lane is free. Now top is a pretty tricky lane to pin down for a meta. The current meta usually has 2 tanks in a team, and so top laners generally were people like Garen or Warwick, tanks who could withstand damage to get back to their lane. But then we also have people like Teemo who will go top as a specific counter to Nasus. Vayne and Quinn can also go top despite being marksmen because they're good at shredding the tanks that go top, and Gnar is sometimes a tank and sometimes not, so it gets quite complicated on top lane. Because of changes to smite as well, there is also a tendency in higher rated games to take teleport and smite as a top laner, so that the top laner can cover the jungle, cover his team's jungle, and can use the jungle buffs and pressure the enemy jungler, as well as giving more control over things like Dragon and Baron. Now let's talk about the jungle and some of the nasty things that can live in there. It's a scary place, and I really wouldn't bother going there until you hit level 20. That is, your summoner level is 20, and you get some runes and masteries. The basic idea of the jungler is to make use of the monsters between the lanes to get extra experience and gold without sapping any from the lanes. They take Smite as a summoner spell, and in its basic form it is only usable on monsters. However, with the new jungle item changes, you can use it sometimes on human characters when you upgrade your jungle item, so you can smite champions. I won't go into exactly how the different jungle items work. You'll have to either read up on them or watch it in another video, because it would take way too long for me to describe them all, and I don't know enough really about jungling to really give you a good massive section on it. But as a jungler, you should be farming the camps in the jungle and look for the perfect opportunities to gank, which is to go into a lane to help the laner get a kill to help them win their lane. The 2 final things that I want to mention about the jungle. A new feature was released in Season 5, which are jungle buffs. If you smite the big monster in a camp, you will gain a buff from it. So for raptors or the chickens, or whatever you want to call them, on the blue side of the red side, sorry, of the jungle, they give you a buff which allows you to see and destroy an enemy ward if you're spotted by one. Smiting the Gromp, which is the big frog thing, will give you poisonous skin, which means that if somebody attacks you, they take damage. Smiting Wolves creates this little ball of energy that floats around your jungle and gives you vision of any enemy that enters it. Smiting the Krugs, which are the big rock golem things, give you a buff that make every few auto attacks stun an enemy. And finally, red and blue buff. These are a bit different. Killing the blue buff will give you loads of mana regen and cooldown reduction, but smiting it will give you an instant refill of mana. So you can smite it to get your mana back, and then kill it to get the mana regen and the cooldown reduction. Killing red buff will give you health regen and makes your auto attacks slow and burn enemies, and smiting it will give you an instant refill of health. The red and blue buffs are transferred to enemies if you die. So if an enemy kills you, he will take your buffs, which one of your team could then kill and take back from him. Whereas the smited buffs, like the wolves or whatever, and the dragon and baron buffs, are not transferable. You've heard me talking about the dragon and baron as well throughout this video, so I'll just give you a quick rundown of what they are. The final jungle monsters are dragon and baron, or baron nashor or nasher. Killing dragon provides your entire team with a buff. Every dragon you get gives your team the next level of the buff, while killing your 5th dragon doubles the effects of the first 4. So there's 5 levels of buff. Each one does a different thing. I'll put that in the video. I'll show you what they do. When you kill your 5th dragon, you'll see a load of fire around your character for a couple of minutes, or until you die. And after this effect is worn off or you've died, you'll need to kill the dragon again to regain it, and the dragon respawns every 6 minutes. Baron is the most powerful monster in the game, the most powerful neutral monster. It usually requires your entire team, and it hurts like fuck. Killing it though rewards you with extra damage and ability power, a quick recall, and an aura around you that buffs your friendly minions. It's usually used to help break sieges by giving your minions the stats that they need to push through to the enemy towers, and can really change the game. For example, the cannon minions will be able to hit the tower while being out of range of the tower, so obviously You just need to sit there next to them and let them push the tower and force the enemies to try and come out to get them. So it's really good for helping you to close out games. Right, we're nearing the end of the video, I swear. The final couple of things I want to talk to you about are the different kinds of damage and resistance. I won't bother going into numbers because they bore me, but I'll introduce you to the core concepts. There are 3 types of damage. Physical damage, which is built by buying attack damage items. Magic damage, which is increased by buying ability power items. Someone has just texted me. And true damage, which is usually just built into a champion in their abilities or their kit. Armor is usually used, you just heard me burp, it's usually used to reduce the enemy's physical damage. Magic resistance reduces the effect of the ability power of an enemy, and to counter true damage the only defense is health. True damage just does the damage that it says it will do. It's not affected by resistance. So building health means that it's got more health to go through. You can also buy armor and magic penetration items to nullify some of the armor and magic resistance that the enemy has. That's it for today, guys. Obviously, if there's anything else you want to know, feel free to ask me, but if you ask me for something that is already in this video, I will make you eat spider webs. And now I get to go and record the video for this stuff. That's going to be so much fun. This is already like 20 minutes. Oh, yay. Oh, thanks for watching.